Hello, this is my Hydrasynth desktop machine. I'm going to be dissecting this quite complex patch to give an idea of how to get these evolving and rather unpredictable sounds. We'll be spending much of the time in the mod matrix and with oscillator wave scanning. I'm assuming that you've read these bits of the manual, which is very well written, by the way. It's helpful to know the shortcuts for selecting mod sources and destinations using the module buttons, for example. And you should be familiar with the front panel buttons, so when I say something like go into the filter module, you'll know which button I just pressed, and etc, etc. I'm zoomed in on the screens so you can see the characters, so you won't see all my button pressing, obviously. The sound you can hear now is exactly the same patch, only with all the modulations dialed down to 0. I'm going to be bringing them back in one by one so you can hear how the patch is built up. It's a fairly bog standard sounding plucky or percussive voice. The arpeggiator is on latch, so I've got both hands free to modify it. Now you can see envelope 1, which by default controls the filter cutoff, has quite a short spike and 0 sustain. If I go into the filter 1 that is, you can see the cutoff is quite low, but envelope 1 amount is enough to give it that bright attack. Envelope 2 has a similar shape, and that modulates the amp or the volume over the duration of each note. Quite similar, you know, quite a fast attack. Fast-ish decay time and 0 sustain. In the mixer module, I'll put oscillator 2 to 0 for now, so you can hear more clearly the changes I make to oscillator 1, which is there at about a medium setting. In oscillator 1, I've got the mode set to WaveScan. In this mode, the wave list edit page is available, so press the button above it to select, and here I've already picked some waves in the first 4 slots. You can have up to 8, but now you can hear only 1 wave at the moment because nothing is modulating the scan. You need some modulation to get that movement along the wave sequence. Now I'm going into the mod matrix, which is where it gets a bit interesting. In the first slot, I've got LFO 5 as the source and oscillator 1 as the destination, and WaveScan is the oscillator 1 parameter that the LFO will be affecting. The depth is 0 so far, but as I turn it up, you can hear the different waves in my wave sequence coming in. Starting to sound a bit more interesting already. Let's have a look at LFO 5. It's quite a slow sine wave, 0.19 Hz, that's fairly slow. I find that if the speed is too high, this sort of modulation can sound a bit chaotic and scratchy and not so musical. Sounds a bit glitchy. That's not really the effect I'm after here, so I'll put it down roughly to what it was. Now trig sync is an important one for this. The default in factory patches is often poly, so if I put it to poly, it now doesn't seem to be doing very much. That's because the LFO is being re-triggered with every note, so it can't get past the first wave in the sequence. If I turn the speed up far enough, you might hear a bit of scanning going on there, but again we're back to the sort of glitchiness. We're after something that's a bit more slow and evolving. Same is true for single mode. So off means that the wave is free running, so it flows independently of any of the note on signals. Let's go back into the mod matrix. I've got another LFO, LFO 2, which modulates the pan position of oscillator 1. Now pan is a mixer parameter. That was something I didn't get at first. I was looking for pan position in the oscillator modules, but once you know it's in the mixer, I guess it makes sense. I mean, you get pan pots on mixing desks after all. LFO2 is also a fairly slow sine wave, and let's just go back in there, and if I increase the depth, you get a bit more movement and width. I'm sure you're listening to this in stereo, of course you are. Now, let's go back into the mixer for a moment. I'll bring up oscillator 2 and take oscillator 1 down, so you can hear that we'll do something similar to oscillator 2. In the OSC2 module, I've got a different set of 4 waves. Let's go into Wave Edit. It's up to you to pick whichever ones you think sound good together. Into the mod matrix, and LFO5 is also modulating the WaveScan for OSC2. So let's bring up and there it is, you can hear it scanning through the waves. Let's go into OSC2 and have a look at the wave list, and you can play around with the different waves, see how they sound. Well, they all sound quite nice. Put that back roughly to what it was. Now, back in the mod matrix, go down a page, and we have another slow sine wave in LFO3 to modulate the pan for oscillator 2. I turn up the depth and off it goes, panning to and fro. Back in the mixer, I'll bring up oscillator 1 to about the same level, and there they are panning at different speeds. In the mod matrix again, we have yet another slow sine wave from LFO4, which modulates the volume of oscillator 1 and oscillator 2. I've had to use 2 slots for this. Go down a page, unfortunately they're on different pages. Oscillator 2 volume, oscillator 1 volume. Now I'm going to set the depth the same in both directions, the same plus and minus values, roughly the same. You have to have them about the same, otherwise you might find that the overall volume is fluctuating too much. Now what's happening here is that they're cross-fading. Oscillator 1 and 2 are cross-fading with one another at the same rate, because it's the same oscillator that's affecting the volume of each. Again, if the speed of this crossfade is different from the speed of the WaveScan, the shifts in timbre are all the more unpredictable, which is something I rather enjoy. Now these LFOs, if we go into the LFO1 module and look at the rate, you can see they're all rather different rates, and the way they beat one against the other is all part of the unpredictability that I enjoy so much. Go back into the mod matrix, and which page are we on? Here we are. I've got LFO1 assigned to the attack time of envelope 1 and envelope 2. So remember that they're the ones that affect filter cutoff and volume respectively. In both, I'm going to modify the attack time just a little, so you intermittently get a slightly softer attack. It's just a small amount, just subtle. Don't want to overdo it. I'll exaggerate it just so that you can hear. And that's not bad. You might actually like that, but it's I think the effect is a bit too exaggerated. I quite like a subtle softening of the attack. Anyway, you can set those to taste. This might be a good moment to say what I'd have done differently if I'd been building this patch from the ground up, say from an initialized patch. You have loads of pages in the mod matrix, and there's nothing to stop you leaving blank slots so that you can group your slots by source or by destination. You could have all the ones that affect the filter on one or three of the ones that you have set to modulate the filter cutoff, for example, on the one page, or use another page to have all the ones that affect the WaveScan of oscillator 1, another page for those that affect the WaveScan of oscillator 2, etc, etc. But I didn't think that far ahead, and I just used the next long slot each time, and I think I'll organise it better next time. Let's finally look at the arpeggiator settings. So if I go into Shift On the arpeggiator, the mode is on random, but on page 2 are some, I think, very exciting parameters: ratchet and chance. If I set the chance, or the probability if you like, to about 40-45%, something like that, and turn up the ratchet, I think it really brings these arpeggios to life. Ratchet is something I associate with analog sequences on the old Moog modulars, and it's very much a stylistic thing for Berlin school artists like Tangerine Dream. But the one on the Hydrasynth has a nice elaboration though, where it seems to occasionally do a fill at different clock divisions, rather unpredictably. Let's turn it up a bit more. And that, plus all 5 LFOs running alongside one another at slightly different rates, causing these ever-shifting timbres, you have a sequence that never seems to repeat. Well, that's my dissection of this patch done now. You can hear a longer recording of the patch over on my other channel, Brittle, which is where I share my purely musical projects rather than the demos and tutorials, which are all on this channel. There's a link in the description below. I hope to be doing more tutorials and demos on this instrument as I discover for myself what you can do with it. So thank you for watching. Have fun with mega modulations on your own Hydrasynth. So bye bye.